Nature raises you, then you go away from God or divinity, and nature is the one to help you somehow have a connection back to divinity. Nature is not God herself, but like an access to God. Hello and welcome back to NibblePop. We have already done one poem by William Wordsworth, Tintern Abbey, and today in this video we are going to look at another of his very memorable poems, which is popularly called the Immortality Ode. Don't skip anything in this video because we are going to take up, like we always do, every line of the poem and then talk about the images, the rhyme scheme, the different patterns which emerge and how they are all connected to Wordsworth's idea of romanticism and nature in this long video. Just kidding, it's not going to be a long video, although the poem is definitely a long one. But it's a simple poem, although the philosophy is very deep, and let's explore together this wonderful poem right here on NibblePop. Now, although I know many of you have watched the video on Tintern Abbey as well as the background of romantic poetry or in general romantic age that we have made, but still just to brush up your memory, let me remind you that Wordsworth was or is considered to be one of the first persons who brought in romantic period in England. It was with his lyrical ballads, which he published in collaboration with S.T. Coleridge, who was his very good friend. They published lyrical ballads in 1798. Wordsworth was born in 1770, so he was pretty young at that time. And then that collection of poems, it brought in a fresh lease of life for the kind of poetry that was popular but was losing grounds. So Wordsworth had a great contribution to make this movement from neoclassicism to romanticism a very delightful one. And since almost our birth or initiation into literature, we are familiar with many of Wordsworth's poems, especially poems like Daffodils, The Solitary Reaper, and now this poem which we are going to take up today is comparatively a long one, although the message is the same thing. Nature is supreme, and we will understand what impact nature has on a person like Wordsworth. This poem was published in his collection of poems in 2 volumes in 1807, and the whole title of this poem is Ode: Intimations of Immortality from Recollections of Early Childhood. So it's a very long title again, just as we had in case of Tintern Abbey. And let me again remind you something else which I had told you when I was doing Tintern Abbey with you, that the poems by Wordsworth, especially these kinds of poems like Tintern Abbey, like Immortality Ode, these kinds of poems may also be seen as poetic essays. So it's like there's a development of thought, and he gives you whatever he's thinking in a logical manner. And at the same time, he repeats himself. Yes, there is a repetition of images, and at times you might feel that he is saying the same thing over again, but that is only because he wants to make sure that his points are communicated appropriately and effectively. Okay. He begins this poem with a set of lines which are from another poem of his. Okay, so we will just go through the lines, the first few lines of his poem. The child is father of the man, and I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety. And that poem is My Heart Leaps Up. Now, since the poem from which these lines are taken is a very short one, I'll just give you the whole poem. You can see it right on the screen. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So was it when my life began, so is it now I am a man. So be it when I shall grow old, or let me die. So the first part of this poem means that whenever he sees a rainbow in the sky, he feels happy. He had always felt happy when he was a child. Now that he has grown up, and eventually when he'll grow old and die, he would still be happy by the rainbow in the sky. And then he says the lines which begin our immortality ode to. And those lines are very important. They are the key lines of the poem. The child is father of the man. This line apparently looks like a paradox. Paradox is what? Whenever you say something which looks like this cannot be true, we know what? That man is father of a child, right? But here he is saying child is the father of man. Why? Because on a deeper level he believes that a child is wiser than an adult. A child knows things which an adult doesn't know. Okay, so we will come to an explanation of what he means by this later, and just let's read on. And I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety. Piety means piousness, goodness of the soul. So he wants to lead a pious life, a life where he is led by humanity, where he passes one day after the other without any grand sense of achievement. He doesn't have any big ambition. He only wants to ensure that he stays human. Okay, so that's what he wants. And then he straight away goes to the main part of his poem. There was a time when meadow, grove and stream, the earth and every common sight to me did seem apparelled in celestial light. So he's talking about a time in his life when all these things, what things? Meadow, which means the green valleys, grove, stream, earth, common things which you see around you, those things appeared to him as if they were apparelled. Apparel means clothes or garment. So as if everything in nature that was, kind of wearing a dress, an apparel. What kind of apparel? Celestial light, divine light. It's like he could see a halo, surrounding a mountain or a tree, as if all these things appeared magically clothed to him when he was a child. The glory and the freshness of a dream. So he is somehow comparing that childhood to a state of dream when everything appeared to be, mystified and mysterious and clothed in light. Okay, and somehow childhood is associated with this kind of image. Also in case of William Blake, you remember Songs of Innocence, we had just covered that a few days back. In Lamb we see a world of innocence where everything is clothed in transcendental light and divine light we see around the lamb and the child. They are all connected with God. The same kind of emotion is seen in this poem as well. It is not now as it had been of yore. Now he has grown up, he has become an adult. This poem was written sometime after 1800, so he is of course an adult now, and this is a phase where he has lost that charm of childhood. That air of mystery around natural objects is gone. Turn wheresoever I may, by night or day, the things which I have seen I now can see no more. So there is a sense of loss. What has Wordsworth lost? He has lost his childhood sight, his childhood ability to see things in a magical way. So remember when we were doing Tintern Abbey, we were seeing how he's talking about past memories, 5 long years have passed and he is revived by those memories. So it's all about nostalgia, and romantic poetry is nothing if not nostalgia. Nostalgia for what? For a certain kind of existence which existed beforehand. Now it doesn't exist. So for him, now it's a state of loss. And this is the central idea of the poem. If you are to give one word to describe what the poem is about, it's about loss and how he manages to recover something of it. Now, from the very beginning, let us focus on the form and meter of the poem as well. Look at the rhyme scheme. When you look at the first few lines, you would see it's a steady pattern. A, B, A, B, A pattern. So it's like alternating rhyme scheme. It's very musical, very steady, consistent. But when he starts to describe how things have changed, from line 6 onwards, the pattern changes. And now we have what? We have a kind of a C, D, D, C rhyme. Okay, so that breaks the rhyme. And somehow this seems to turn back and forth, as if he is looking back at his childhood days with a change in the way the rhyme is speaking to you. Poetry is all about the sound effect that is created. The rainbow comes and goes, and lovely is the rose. Again, see, when he's describing natural objects, he's trying to keep it simple. The language here is simple because Wordsworth was a great advocate of simple language. Back in those days, this was very simple language. After Milton and Pope and Dryden, this looks pretty simple to us also. The rainbow comes and goes, and lovely is the rose. The moon doth with delight look round her when the heavens are bare. So when the sky is bare, heavens here means sky, there's no cloud, then the moon is shining even brighter. Waters on a starry night are beautiful and fair. The sunshine is a glorious birth because the day begins with the sunshine or the sunrise, so it's like a birth. But yet I know wherever I go that there hath passed away a glory from the earth. All these things that he describes here, that rainbow and then the moon, the stars, the sunshine, everything is still glorious, still beautiful, but something has gone away. The element of childhood magic has gone away. It happens, when we go to a beach vacation, when we are very young, we have certain memories etched in our minds. The ocean appears vaster, or the sea appears bigger, mightier, and the mountains, they appear as if they are more magnificent than when we go there as an adult. Why? Because maybe when we go to any tourist spot when we are grown-ups, we are obsessed or bothered about which place to book for the night stay and what the mode of transport will be. So we kind of mechanically view the place as itineraries, as items that has to be checked. People carry checklists. Have you watched this? Have you watched that? So those checklists, those markers are signs of adult tourism. But when a child goes to visit a place, it's always full of wonder. That wonder is missing. So Wordsworth is saying that earlier when he was a child, a baby, then these things, the rainbow, the moon, the heavens, the waters, the sunshine, they appeared to be clothed in bright light, and now they are still beautiful. He's still writing poetry on that, but they have lost that magical value or magical glory. So he's saying, passed away a glory from the earth. Now, when you look at loss, what loss is he really talking about? It's not just his personal loss. Remember from our discussion on the background of Romantic period, I had emphasized on two things that were happening. One, people were losing faith every day with the development of science. They were starting to question their faith. On the other hand, the rapid industrialization was threatening London, was threatening England with a depletion of environmental assets like trees, and people were rushing towards cities. So there was this mass movement towards urban places. Manchester, London, these places were getting crowded and overcrowded and smoky. If you have read Chimney Sweeper and London by Blake, you would know what London smoke looks like. This is the loss which Wordsworth is also talking about. So it's not just his personal loss. It's as if England has lost something, because England before this time had been in a pristine stage where maybe there were not so many industrial progress or so much industrial development, but there was peace and there was this glory of divinity. This is something which in Dover Beach we have Matthew Arnold talking about the sea of faith now going away. This is the loss. The earth has lost her real beauty because of what Blake had called satanic mills. Okay. Now, while the birds does sing a joyous song, so now when Wordsworth is writing this poem, even now the birds are singing in a beautiful way. And while the young lambs bound, Christian ethos, remember, lamb is always associated with who? Jesus Christ. So he is looking around himself. He's right now standing at a meadow, at a pleasant valley. Around him he can see these little creatures, lambs, some kids are playing, some shepherd boys. And while the young lambs bound as to the tabor's sound, to me alone there came a thought of grief. Everybody around him were in extreme happiness. They were enjoying themselves because the people or the animals he's describing here, they are all very young. They are not corrupted by maturity, by adulthood. So he can see that I am like different from these animals who are happily roaming about. To me alone there came a thought of grief. What grief? The grief about his loss, that he cannot become young like them. He has lost his youth or his childhood. A timely utterance gave that thought relief. So he had this grief inside him, this sorrow inside him, and he expresses that sorrow. Timely utterance. Utterance means when you express something through words. So how is he expressing himself? By writing this poem. So this poem acts like a healing process for him. So through this poem, through poetry, he's trying to recover that lost happiness and feeling of glory. A timely utterance gave that thought relief, and I again am strong. So the more he speaks, the more he realizes that he has some strength in him. The cataracts blow their trumpets from the steep. Now he goes on describing everything that he sees around him. No more shall grief of mine the season wrong. Beautiful way of writing. Wordsworth has this amazing capacity of handling sentence structures, and he creates proverbs which go on down centuries. Look at what he's saying here. No more shall grief of mine the season wrong. Wrong here is verb. Wrong means to do wrong to the season. This season he's describing the month of May. Like you can say late spring in England, and it's a beautiful time. Everything is so fresh and green and flowering all around him. He feels that if he is sorrowful, if he has grief, then that will do injustice, that will do wrong to the season. So he is saying, no more shall grief of mine the season wrong, which means no more will I let my sorrow do any wrong to this season, which means I will participate in the happiness of this season because I want to be, in unison with everybody around me who are there. Okay. I hear the echoes through the mountains throng. The winds come to me from the fields of sleep, and all the earth is gay. And from the moment that he feels that he should not be a mismatch to this whole surroundings, this beautiful part of the year, he tries to focus on the positive images. The winds are rushing in and the world is so happy. Land and sea give themselves up to jollity. Jollity means enjoyment, fun, happiness, joyfulness. And with the heart of me doth every beast keep holiday, thou child of joy, shout round me. So not just animals, he's talking about human kids as well. Let me hear thy shouts, thou happy shepherd boy. The idea of a shepherd boy is also very, you can say, it's like a trope, it's like a pattern, it's like a repeatedly used image. This is also defined as the archetype later on by philosopher Carl Jung. Archetypes are these set images which bring about a certain kind of emotion in the reader. When you say shepherd boy, you don't talk about a boy who is going out with lambs and just helping them roam about. It's not just that. Shepherd boy has with it the connotation of the Christ figure, because a shepherd does what? He takes care of his flock. Just like Christ said, he is the Lamb of God, and then God is like the shepherd. And there's a song actually, and there are hymns where God is referred to as the shepherd. So in that state of innocence, these children who are acting as shepherds, they are taking on a divine role. So Wordsworth feels that he is an outcast, he is an adult, he doesn't belong here, and then he feels that no, I must participate. I must somehow manage to be a part of this beautiful scene. I have lost this ability, but I will have to regain that. And how does he do that? He blessed creatures. He is referring to the lambs that he is seeing around him and the shepherd boy. Okay, they are also playing there. I have heard the call ye to each other make. I see the heavens laugh with you in your jubilee. So when you are enjoying, I can hear God's laughter in your laughter. So they are directly referred to as divine creatures. My heart is at your festival. My head hath its coronal. The fullness of your bliss I feel it all. So he surrenders. He says that my heart is at your disposal. My head means my brain, my thought. So heart means emotion, head means logic, reason, intelligence, intellect. So he surrenders with his entire self in front of these tiny little creatures, these young children, because he feels that, well, he has told that, right? Child is father of the man. Oh, evil day, if I were sullen while earth herself is adorning. Sullen means, in a bad mood, sulking, sad, morose, sorrowful. So while everybody is enjoying, while the earth is decorating herself because it's spring now, I would be a mismatch. This sweet May morning, and the children are culling on every side in 1,000 valleys far and wide. Now Wordsworth, when he writes, he often uses a lot of exaggeration and sometimes hyperbole. Hyperbole is when you give a figure which is way more than what they actually are. Like in Daffodils, he says, 10,000 saw I at a glance. I don't know how you can manage to have any idea of how how big a field should be to view 10,000 daffodils. And so this is a way of expressing. It doesn't matter. Maybe he saw 100 daffodils. Maybe he saw 2,000 daffodils. We don't know. 10,000 is a round figure. Just like that, here he is using in 1,000 valleys. He is saying valleys and he is saying a 1,000 valleys. Usually what do? We say 1,000 valley or in thousands of valleys. But he is, of course, he was a great English poet. So this is not a mistake. This is a deliberate inclusion of an article. Why is he doing this? Because here 1,000 valleys is just a symbolic way to say a lot of valleys, like right across the globe. This is May and everybody everywhere is happy. This is what he's saying. Fresh flowers. Look at the alliteration, He gives all these beautiful things right through his poem. That's why Wordsworth's poems are teachers' favorites, because they can ask you all kinds of questions, all kinds of figures of speech emerge in Wordsworth's poems. Fresh flowers while the sun shines warm and the babe leaps up on his mother's arm. I hear, with joy I hear. But there's a tree of many, one, a single field which I have looked upon. Both of them speak of something that is gone. Now the point is, he wants to participate in the joyful celebration of spring. But the fact is, he has grown up and now he looks at a tree which is maybe a lonely tree. You have trees who stand together and you have these random lonely trees alone, and he feels that this tree is like me, alone, secluded. And then he looks at a field which is also alone and he thinks that, are they also unhappy because they are alone and lonely? Okay, so strange. Now this is the kind of empathy. Empathy means where you feel a connection. So he's feeling connection. He wants to feel connection with the spring, with the May or with the flowers of May. But he ends up feeling connected with what? With images which are part of nature, but still looking somehow sad and lonely, because that is what he is. So he projects his emotions onto the natural objects. He is sad and somehow he manages to make himself or convince himself that this tree is sad, this tree is lonely, that field is lonely. So he is saying both of them speak of something that is gone. The pansy at my feet doth the same tale repeat, even the flowers at his feet. Why is this happening? These are natural objects. This is May morning. They are supposed to laugh and smile and enjoy these trees, these flowers. Look, trees, flowers, maybe they have some vegetarian or vegetable emotions which we are not aware of, but they are certainly not capable of feeling any human emotions that we are sure of. They don't have brains like us. Therefore, whatever emotions or whatever loss Wordsworth says that this tree, this flower is feeling, is not their loss, it is Wordsworth's loss. So Wordsworth is seeing himself reflected in nature. Alright. Whither is fled the visionary gleam? Where is that dream? Where is that vision which I had as a child? Where is it now? The glory and the dream, the repetition of loss. And this set of interrogative sentences, you can also call it rhetorical interrogation, questions which kind of have their answers hidden in them. When he's saying, where is that visionary gleam or that glory or that dream, he's trying to say that they are gone. They are nowhere. So these are rhetorical questions, okay? And then the most remarkable line of this poem, my personal favorite line. Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. Now, Why is this line so significant? You see, normally we have this idea in our minds that death is like sleep. It's like we'll fall asleep, right? And in Greek mythologies, there are ideas that after death you have to immerse yourself, drown yourself in a river of forgetfulness, which is also called Lethe or Lethe. And after that you forget everything. So after death you forget whatever has happened in your life and you pass on to your next life or afterlife or whatever it is. So usually in our minds we see death as a moment when we forget whatever has happened in our life. He is saying the opposite. So he is inverting this idea. Again, second paradox. So the first paradox of this poem is child is father of the man, which is again not of this poem, it belongs to another poem, but here also, since it's the first line of this poem, so we can call it the first paradox mentioned in the poem. Another paradox is our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. What does he mean? He says that when we take birth, before that we are in a state of immortality. We are at one with God. And when we take birth, right at that moment, we have memory of that past existence, of that immortal existence. That's why a newborn child is like divinity itself. And the more we grow up, we tend to forget things. I'm sure if you try to remember things about your childhood, you won't be able to remember what you did, how your life was when you were like 2 years old, 1 year old. It's not possible for us to remember those things. We do forget. So forgetting is part of growing up. And Wordsworth insists that it's not just the human experiences that we forget, but the divine experience before birth. So he's saying that we have some memories when we are born and we simply get rid of those memories and eventually forget them altogether. And this life is like forgetting. This life is like a dream. This somehow reminds me of this movie Matrix, where it said that everything around you is something like you're dreaming. You're actually in a battery cell dreaming up this whole thing and participating in here. So this is somehow very surrealistic. This is not a realistic way to say things, that this life is but a dream. But he is always very sure of one thing, that a child knows more than an adult. And from where does this knowledge come? From before birth. Now, when we were discussing Romanticism, we had talked about John Locke. If you have not watched that video, I'll just give you a short recap of what Locke did. John Locke, he was a philosopher who maintained that when we are born, we are like this clean slate. Our brains are all empty and we start collecting different kinds of sensations, and then that adds to our knowledge. So this is Locke's idea of tabula rasa, where he says that we are not born with any innate knowledge. But Wordsworth is going like completely opposite to Locke's idea, and he's saying that no, we are born with memories of a paradise where we were before we were born. So this dream like state, this life is like an interruption, and we will soon wake up again when we die. And then he goes on to describe his idea. Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting, the soul that rises with us, our life's star. So there is a soul which rises with us, hath had elsewhere its setting, and cometh from afar. So before our birth we had an existence. Our soul had an existence, and that was far away from this place, somewhere paradisal. Not in entire forgetfulness and not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come from God, who is our home. So we don't come like tabula rasa. We don't come like a blank slate. We don't come completely forgetting everything. When we come, we bring with us the memory of our homeland, home which is God. So now, normally we do not associate romantic poets with religious ideas, because normally we see if you look at William Blake, conventional churches, they pronounced him like a heretic. We have Shelley completely going mad with his rebellion against religion. Romanticism is rebellion. So what is Wordsworth doing here? Maybe he's really getting old now, because he's talking about God all the time, and this God is very much in the image of the Christian God. He's saying that we are one with God, and when we are born, we do not forget everything. In the first 2-3 years of our lives, we remember the moments when we are with God, or we were with God. And so that age of innocent childhood is a divine state of being. Okay, so he's repeating himself, that's all. So this is the central idea, that not in entire forgetfulness, not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come. So when we come, we appear in this world. When we take birth, we are coming, riding on glorious clouds from God, who is our home. Heaven lies about us in our infancy. So the closest we are to God is when we are just born or still kids. So heaven lies about us. We have heaven all around us when we are kids. Shades of the prison house begin to close upon the growing boy. So look at the beautiful image he is creating. This life is like a prison house, and the bars are closing down on you. You were free when you were not born, then you are born, and then the prison house, it starts to trap you. And you remember those lines from Tintin Abbey? He's talking about London city, and he's talking about the fretful star, unprofitable, and the fever of the world. This is the prison which he's talking about. Reality is prison. It makes you forget from where you have come. But he beholds the light, and whence it flows, he sees it in his joy, the youth who daily further from the east. So maybe you are growing up, and every time you are having a new day in your life, you are going away from that moment of birth, right? Every day you are going away from that moment of birth. And this is like you are going further from the east. So he is looking at our lives as a process from sunrise to sunset. So we journey from east to west, because sun rises in the east and sets in the west. So we move from east to west, and then he says, the youth who daily further from the east must travel still is nature's priest. Like, it's okay if you are growing old, you can still appreciate nature, and by the vision splendid is on his way attended, and nature will always look upon that person, if that person believes that nature is like an extension of God. This we have seen in Tintin Abbey too, right? At length the man perceives it die away. Yes, at the end that glory will fade. We will reach our sunsets and fade into the light of common day. Earth fills her lap with pleasures of her own. So this whole earth is full of beautiful things, beautiful, gorgeous objects of nature, yearnings she hath in her own natural kind. So emotions in human hearts, they are also created by the earth, by nature, and Wordsworth is not against human emotions. and even with something of a mother's mind and no unworthy aim. So Wordsworth is comparing nature to mothers. So he's saying that nature has a mother's mind. And what does nature do? And no unworthy aim. So the aim, the target, the ambition of nature is to do something which mothers do. And what do mothers do? The homely nurse doth all she can. So once he's comparing nature to mother, and now he's comparing nature to a nurse. To make her foster child, her inmate man, forget the glories he hath known. Now this is a very tricky thing he's saying. We know that Wordsworth is a worshipper of nature. Very good. But here he is giving a different kind of a sentiment. He is saying that nature raises a person like a foster child. So foster child is not somebody's real child. It's like human beings are taken care of by nature. And this kind of a sentiment is also seen in his Lucy poems. If you are familiar with Lucy poems, there also we see that Lucy, an imagined character, is shown to be raised by nature, and she dies pretty young, and that's a very sad thing too. But the same kind of sentiment, that nature is like a nurse and a teacher too. And what does nature do here? Now this is tricky. Just look at what he's saying. Homely nurse, and what does she do? Her inmate man. Note the word inmate. Normally we use the word inmate when we talk about prisoners, convicted prisoners, or people who are admitted in asylums or hospitals, patients. So in an imprisoned state, restricted movement, that is quality of an inmate. So man is like an inmate in hands of nature. That's not a very positive thing to say. He is saying that nature, it gives you a happy feeling, but it also makes you forget God. Yes, forget God. So he's saying, forget the glories he hath known and that imperial palace whence he came. Why does nature do that? Now that's also a very tricky thing. Nature wants you to be humble. Nature teaches you humility, not pride. Now if we keep on remembering that we were sitting with God, enjoying our time with God, then we will start feeling very proud, which is not good for humanity. So nature decides to make us forget our high position so that we see ourselves as just human beings. So nature teaches us to be humble. And for that, nature has to make us forget from where we have come. Behold the child among his newborn blisses. Now he is looking at one child playing in front of him. A 6 years darling of a pygmy size, a small little boy. See, where amid work of his own hand he lies, fretted by sallies of his mother's kisses. So he is, kind of enjoying himself. His mother is filling him with kisses. He's playing with some small little things, with light upon him from his father's eyes. This kind of is reminiscent of Blake's World of Innocence. Especially there is a poem called Infant Joy, and you have a similar kind of an idea here. The child is protected by a loving mother and father, and he's playing with his playthings. And then he describes the game that this child is playing. See at his feet some little plan or chart, some fragment from his dream of human life. Life is always like a dream, he had just told us. So what the child is doing is he is playing things which children play, play acting, playing house, or playing or just imitating some character. Some fragment from his dream of human life, shaped by himself with newly learned art. So this child has learned to act like maybe a doctor, or maybe a cook, or maybe something else altogether. So this child is imagining himself to be an adult, and playing. This all of us, we did that, right? When we were young kids, we used to play act all kind of roles we know of. And then he is describing some situations which the child is probably making with his toys and playthings. A wedding or a festival, a mourning or a funeral. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because it's all a game, okay? And this had now his heart. He is completely focused on his game, this child. And unto this he frames his song. He is totally engrossed. He is singing to himself. Then will he fit his tongue to dialogues of business, love or strife. So since this child is imagining himself as an adult, he will also talk like an adult while playing. But it will not be long, or this be thrown aside. With new joy and pride, this little actor cons another part. Maybe after a few minutes he'll get bored, imagining himself as a teacher. Then he'll start to imagine himself as a doctor. So he will keep on changing his role. But the question which Wordsworth has for this child is very unique. Filling from time to time his humorous stage with all the persons down to palsied age. So he is first imagining himself to be a young man, then maybe an old man, maybe he is play acting as a grandfather figure. So he does everything out of sheer childhood joy that life brings with her in her equipage. Equipage means a whole spread of actors. So this is also very similar to Shakespeare's idea of 7 ages of man being 7 parts which we play in our lives. So this child is playing as an actor in his game, as if his whole vocation were endless imitation. Now this is what our lives are too, aren't they? We all imitate our role models, what we believe in, and this child in his game is doing what we do as adults, we imitate. Thou, whose exterior semblance doth belie thy soul's immensity. Now we will have a lot of big and heavy words, because this is where Wordsworth is philosophizing. He is saying exterior semblance. Semblance means appearance. You, whose outer appearance shows your immensity of soul. Why? Because a 6-year-old is a child, and since according to Wordsworth's theory, a child is divine, so this child's soul is immense. It's not yet imprisoned in an adult life. Thou best philosopher, who yet dost keep thy heritage, thou eye among the blind. So he is decorating or glorifying this child with so many adjective clauses here. He's calling him a philosopher. He's calling him an eye among the blind, this child. That deaf and silent readest the eternal deep, haunted forever by the eternal mind, mighty prophet, seer, blessed. So he is really throwing himself out to so many, you can say, praiseworthy words he is associating with the child. So the child is the prophet, the child is the seer, on whom those truths do rest. Because you are just born, just 6 years back you were born. So maybe you have not forgotten that you are a divine existence. And so you are like a prophet, a seer. In darkness lost, the darkness of the grave. So you are still almost one with God. Thou, over whom thy immortality broods like the day, you are still almost like that immortal soul, because you are not yet corrupted by reality, experience and matured life. Okay, you are not yet corrupted by that. A master over a slave. So immortality is like master. We are like slaves. Slaves of what? Immortality. Because maybe we always want to reach that state of being immortal, but we are mortals. So that is like being a master over our heads. So this child is still sharing some connection with that immortal being, God. a presence which is not to be put by. So you are in this great state now, this 6-year boy is. And then Wordsworth is saying that don't throw that away. Don't just forget from where you have come. Thou little child, yet glorious in the might of heaven-born freedom, you still have in you that quality of heavenliness or divinity, you can say. On thy being's height, why with such earnest pains dost thou provoke the years to bring the inevitable yoke? He is not saying something complicated here. Now let's break this sentence up. Yoke means suffering. Yoke is that wooden structure which is placed on the neck of the bulls or bullock who pull the cart. Okay, so yoke is like a pressure. What pressure? The pressure of life, real life. So he is saying that inevitable yoke, some pressure which will definitely come. What pressure? This child will definitely grow up, so he will have to definitely take up responsibilities which an adult has to take up. So before that time comes, before the years bring that suffering which will come like something which absolutely will come, why are you provoking the years? So why are you imitating the life which is full of suffering? So the child is acting like an adult. An adult's life is full of suffering. Wordsworth can't understand why the child wants this life at all, which is so much full of trouble and like a yoke. Now this is funny because when we are kids, we want to grow up. When we grow up, we want to be kids. We are never happy, it seems. That's being human, I guess. Thus blindly with thy blessedness at strife, the blessedness, the happy state of the child is compromised when he is playing or acting as an adult. Full soon thy soul shall have her earthly fright. Very soon you will grow up. You will go through the adventure of real life, real grown-up life. And custom lie upon thee with a weight. Custom means things which are accepted as laws or you can say rules of society, traditions of our society, those are the customs and they act as heavy weight. Now I want you to look at these words, yoke, strife, fright, weight, all these words, they imply a sense of burden. So life is not just a forgetfulness, but it's like a burden because it drags you down away from divine light. That's what life does. Heavy as frost, see, heavy, and deep almost as life. So what is he comparing with what? He's comparing life with life. That's Wordsworth. When he's on a writing spree, he just goes on using images after images. Oh joy, that in our embers is something that doth live, that nature yet remembers what was so fugitive. He is constantly calling us prisoners. Us means grown-ups. You are almost like grown-up. You're almost there where you will lose everything that Wordsworth says a child has. Nature still remembers. So the point is, nature makes us forget what we are born with. But nature will contain some of that blessedness so that there is a chance of going back, at least temporarily when we are close to nature. Maybe nature has a plan that it takes away something from us and stores it inside itself so that we will always give some importance to nature. This is what Wordsworth feels. The thought of our past years in me doth breed perpetual benediction, not indeed for that which is most worthy to be blessed, delight and liberty. Now there are things he is fascinated by, things like liberty, delight, the simple creed of childhood, whether busy or at rest when a person is in his childhood, with new-fledged hope still fluttering in his breast. Not for these I raise the song of thanks and praise, but for those obstinate questionings of sense and outward things, fallings from us, vanishings. Wordsworth is not entirely sad about the loss. He is rather happy that he is able to question this loss. So somehow he feels that this whole episode or series of episodes are important to him, because this is how he is reaching to a conclusion about the divinity of nature itself. And he says, fallings from us, vanishings. So the memories which are taken away from us, our childhood days which are vanished from us, blank misgivings of a creature moving about in worlds not realized, high instincts before which our mortal nature did tremble like a guilty thing surprised. So he's calling, or he's rather talking about a contrast between instinct and mortal nature. But aren't they same? We are mortals, so we have instincts, just like animals. But no, he says that high instincts are not just normal creature instincts. They are not your drives or just feelings which come to you naturally. They are high instincts. But for those first affections, those shadowy recollections, which be they what they may, are yet the fountain light of all our day. So these shadowy recollections. So he's saying that we forget our divinity, our source of divinity when we are growing up. But at certain moments, we have these flashes, inward flash, maybe from a scene in the mountains, maybe from a wide open sea. We have those flashes of memory. Okay. Are yet a master light of all our seeing, uphold us, cherish, and have power to make our noisy years seem moments in the being of the eternal silence. As I was telling you, that before our birth, we were in a, you can say, immortal vacuum, silence. Now we are born, we are in a dream, we will die, we will go back to that. So this is like a momentary transition, and this is what he's talking about. He is saying our noisy years are moments in the being of the eternal silence. So our birth, our life is that noisy year. And the word noisy, it's not very melodious, is it? Truths that wake to perish never. So when we die, it's like we wake up to truth, which neither listlessness, nor mad endeavor, nor man, nor boy, nor all that is at enmity with joy can utterly abolish or destroy. Truth that is never destroyed, no matter what happens. What truth? Hence, in a season of calm weather, though inland far we be, maybe we are far away from the sea, inland, our souls have sight of that immortal sea which brought us hither. So now he is totally talking in metaphoric terms. He is talking about this immortal existence is like a sea from which we have come, and from, like, we were going to reach there eventually after we die. And we can look at that sea even when we don't have a sea in front of us. Which brought us hither can in a moment travel thither. We can go back to that immortality. So this is the immortality to which he is writing the ode. So when he is writing an ode, he is supposed to address someone. When you write an ode, you address someone. Immortality, you are addressing immortality, then first he has to define immortality. What does he mean by immortality? Then he will say that I am writing an ode to immortality. And what is immortality? He is getting access to immortality by recollections of childhood. That is the whole title. Remember, recollections of childhood. So recollection or memory of childhood is something which links him to immortality, and now he is addressing his ode to immortality. So what happens when he goes back to that immortal state and see the children sport upon the shore and hear the mighty waters rolling evermore? So when you reach that state, go back to that state, then you can see everything beautiful. Children are playing, you can see the beautiful sea. Then sing, ye birds, sing, sing a joyous song, and let the young lambs bound as to the tabor's sound. So there's a repetition of the images which we have seen earlier. We in thought will join your throng. Thought, imagination. So this is the only vehicle which will allow you to reach that point where you can participate in the celebration of this childhood, this innocence. Ye that pipe and ye that play, ye that through your hearts today feel the gladness of the May. Look at the rhyme, the playfulness. It almost reminds us of William Blake's Songs of Innocence, little lamb who made thee, that kind of a rhyme here. And then it breaks again, and he says, what though the radiance which was once so bright be now forever taken from my sight, loss again. So whenever he's talking about what is happening with him, he is even taking recourse to iambic meters here and longer lines, no apparent parity with the lines which just, goes before this. And then he says, though nothing can bring back the hour of splendor in the grass, of glory in the flower, we will grieve not. He is constantly saying that no, I can never reach that pristine state, I can never reach that state of glory, but we will not break down, we will not grieve. Instead, what he decides to do? Rather find strength in what remains behind. Now, although Tennyson, he wrote like almost half a century later, in Ulysses, we have very similar sentiments that what if we are not the same people anymore? What if there is no strength left in us? We can still go for new adventures. So this hope in whatever remains, we'll manage, we'll make do. This is what Wordsworth is doing here too. In the primal sympathy, which having been must ever be. So there is a primal sympathy, there is a connection. It was always there, so maybe it's still there, somehow, hidden somewhere. That primal sympathy, the connection between man and nature, that is something Wordsworth really gives utmost importance to. In the soothing thoughts that spring out of human suffering, and not just nature, when man suffers, out of that suffering, some kind of humanity emerges. You'll see that whenever there's a situation where everybody is very happy, they grow more selfish, and when people are not happy, they come together in shared empathy. They bring about a revolution, right? So somehow human suffering is not always something futile. It brings about empathy, a connection, which Wordsworth talks about. In the faith that looks through death, in years that bring the philosophic mind, and O ye fountains, meadows, hills and groves, now he's addressing everything in nature, forebode not any severing of our loves. We are not separated, not severed from our love. Like the connection with nature is still not lost. Yet in my heart of hearts I feel your might. I only have relinquished one delight. There's only one loss. I cannot be a child anymore, but I have not lost that connection completely. To live beneath your more habitual sway. So when I was a child, I was under complete control of this divinity, of this natural divinity. Now I am away, but there's still a connection somehow. Okay. I love the brooks which down their channels fret, even more than when I tripped lightly as they. When he was a child, then he used to trip a little, walk in an unsteady way. Now he has grown up, but he still loves the brooks, the small little rivers. The innocent brightness of a newborn day is lovely yet. The clouds that gather round the setting sun do take a sober colouring from the eye. So he goes on describing scene after scene from nature that everything has still managed to remain beautiful in his eyes. That hath kept watch over man's mortality, another race hath been, and other palms are won. So it's like a different life when you are grown up. Thanks to the human heart by which we live, thanks to its tenderness, its joys and fears, to me, the meanest flower that blows can give thoughts that do often lie too deep for tears. So it doesn't matter what kind of natural object you're looking at. It can be a small little flower, but even that small flower can be a symbol of eternity. Eternity symbolized through nature. So he says that the human heart is something which helps me stay connected even to the smallest image, or rather the smallest symbol, like the small flower or a mighty cloud. So what do we have here in this poem? The whole idea is he is feeling sorrow at his loss of childhood, but he somehow manages to reach back to a state of understanding where he has some consolation, that he can participate in the happiness that nature provides. Now, interestingly, he took a long time to write this poem. He started writing in some time around 1802, series of questions that came to his mind, and he completed it in 1804. It was published in 1807, but he took almost 2 years to write it. So definitely that's why it's not like a spontaneous overflow. Many people say that Wordsworth talks about spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. He also talks about emotions recollected in tranquility. He had strong feelings at various points, and then he thinks about those feelings, and then he writes about his feelings. That's why sometimes his essay, that's a slip of tongue here. That's why his poems are like essays with beautiful images, but somehow they lack the concreteness, or rather the density that we find in Coleridge's writing, or Keats's writing, or even Shelley's writing. Okay, so this is something here, but he's bringing about a change, of course. So the last 7 stanzas were written like in 1804, and the last part, the rhyme scheme again, it's exactly a mirror of the first stanza. Mirror means somehow there's an inversion too. So we can say that the last stanza looks back at the first stanza. What is happening in the last stanza? He's talking about looking back at his childhood through a connection which is there with nature. So nature acts as a mediator. Nature raises you, then you go away from God or divinity, and nature is the one to help you somehow have a connection back to divinity. So this is why Wordsworth is often called a worshipper of nature, because nature is not God herself, but like an access to God. So everything is like this huge spirit running through everything. Okay, so this is simply like an extension of Tintern Abbey. In Tintern Abbey also we had seen his sentiments regarding human heart, the acts of kindness and of love. The same things are happening here too. So this is a big poem nonetheless, but the idea is simple. He's talking about child being a wiser entity, because a child is in unison with God. A child has not yet forgotten from where a child has come. We, when we grow up, we go away from that state of innocence, just like Blake writes, and then we need to filter ourselves through nature again to go back to that state, so that we can participate in this beautiful spring happiness which happens around us. I hope this poem finds you too in very good spirits, because yes, this is also springtime here. And this is a huge shout out to my very favorite subscriber Disha Khanna, who was missing my pink doll in my last video. So there she is back again, and she says thank you for calling her so awesome, and you all are very awesome too. So till our next video, this is Monami Mukherjee signing off. Stay happy, stay safe, bye bye.